Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2023-24 year-end close training presented by District Business and Advisory Services. And the next slide, I'd like to introduce you to our team. I am Ann Red. What happened to the second slide? The rest of our team are as follows. We have Yin Lam, Jamil Damaya, Richard Aldevar, Susan Ady, who's our director, and Rima Kumar. Okay, so on the next slide, we'll go over our objectives of this training. And our objectives are to gain an understanding of year-end close activities. We're going to review the year-end calendar and timelines. We'll take a look at transferring data from QCC to SACS Web. We'll also look at some SACS reports, and we will share best practices in the report preparation. The next slide shows our training calendar, and we have several training classes. The first two have already occurred, actually the first three for fiscal year in finance, rolling pay lines, and stores. If you would like to view a replay of the first two, you can click on the registration link on the right side of the screen. The registration link has not been posted yet for stores, but as soon as we get that, we will post it. And there's also a class coming up on May 23rd for purchase orders, as well as May 29th for position control. And we highly encourage you to sign up for those trainings. We also have a link at the bottom of the screen for other year-end close training videos as well for your use. And these are pre-recorded. On the next screen, we get to the next screen.
It's stuck.
It's working.
It's not working. There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. This screen outlines our course for today. We'll be looking at the background for procedures. We'll review the SCCOE year-end close schedule, as well as pre-closing activities, current year closing activities. We'll look at some import and export of files. We'll look at the final closing activities as well as best practices, and we will provide you some resources. The next screen, we will go ahead and look at the background for procedures requirements. So the basis for procedures is Ed Code 41010, which requires local education agencies to follow definitions, instructions, and procedures in the California School Accounting Manual. On the next slide, we use the basis of accounting, the modified accrual method, whereby revenues are recognized when they become both measurable and available to finance expenditures of the current period. Most expenditures are recognized, recorded, when the related liability is incurred, and fiscal year end is the only time that revenues and expenditures are accrued. Next slide. So the purpose of fiscal year end closing is closing the books. It separates financial transactions by years and measures the results of operation of a fund for the year. So for the unaudited actual period, the time begins July 1st through June 30th. That represents one full fiscal year. And the unaudited actuals are approved by district boards and uploaded to the SACS Web by September the 15th. So the year-end closing objectives, again, it's to confirm that changes in fund balance are valid from one fiscal year to the next. Want to make sure to validate all asset and liability accounts on the balance sheet and clear out all prior year balances on balance sheet accounts. Next slide. On this slide, we have a sample of the SCCOE year-end close schedule. Next. So what we've done is we've separated by month all of the deadlines. So the first upcoming deadline for June 2024 occurs on June the 27th at 9 p.m. That's the deadline to enter all AP batches for fiscal year 23-24. The following day at 10 a.m., those warrants will be available for pickup for 23-24 warrants that were entered the previous day. At noon will be the deadline to cancel any AP batches for 23-24. And then at 5 p.m. is the cash cutoff. It's the last day for 23-24 deposits to be made at JP Morgan Chase. And any deposits received after June 28th will be posted on July 1st and the new fiscal year 24-25. Next slide. So here's the calendar for July. July 1st, the window opens for the new fiscal year to enter your batches, your accounts payable batches for fiscal year 24-25. The next day at 10 a.m., those warrants will be available for pickup. On July 4th, our office will be closed in observation of July 4th holiday. The next deadline coming up is July 11th at 9 p.m. And that's the last cash transfer between SACS funds for fiscal year 23-24. After July 11th, you want to set up due to, due from for cash transfers with different resources. So for example, if you're moving cash from the general fund to funds outside of the general fund, after July 11th, you have to set up due to, due from. And it's also the last cash transfer or deposit allocations for fiscal year 23-24. On July 31st, cash balance by fund, interest by fund, and cash reconciliations will be provided to the districts from the SCCOE. Next slide. So here's an example of the steps to take if you need to transfer funds from the general fund to funds outside of the general fund after July 11th. Step 1, general fund fiscal year 23-24. You want to debit your due from object code 9310, credit your interfund transfer 7XXX. Step 2, the fund that's borrowing, for example, in this case, it's the cafeteria fund. You want to debit your revenue and credit due to object code 9610. And the next fiscal year, you want to repay the general fund. You want to debit your fund outside of the general fund of 9610. And then for the general fund, credit object code 9310 due from, and cash is automatically offset. Next slide. Here's our August cutoff deadlines. August the 9th at 9 p.m. is the last day the SCCOE will post transactions to fiscal year 23-24. Any exceptions after this date will clearly be communicated to district fiscal directors and CBOs. On August the 15th at 5 p.m., the SCCOE will distribute bond interest and redemption information to districts contingent upon the receipt from the county controller's office. Next slide. We have the September.
Oops, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. We have the September deadlines. We will be closed on September the 2nd for Labor Day. September the 9th at 9 p.m. is the last district entries for fiscal year 23-24. And you want to make sure those are dated June 24th. If for some reason you're not able to meet this cutoff, we ask that you fill out a help desk ticket with TDSD to request an extension for year-end close. On September the 16th, your unaudited actuals are due for fiscal year 23-24, and those will be uploaded to the SACS web system. And also, you want to make sure that your GAN limit resolution is also sent to the SCCOE. On September the 30th at 5 p.m., all of the 23-24 ending balances will be rolled into the 24-25 beginning balances. So all of these deadlines you can use to incorporate your own calendar, and so that you'll be sure to meet all of the target deadlines. Okay, now Yen will cover the pre-closing activities, and that will be followed by Jamil, who will cover the current year closing activities. Yen?
Thank you, Anne. Next slide. Okay, we're at the end of March, the end of May. Let's look at the year-end closing, pre-closing activity. In order to make the closing process easier, we want to look at some items before we close. Let's review the prior year-end balance to ensure it matches the current year beginning balance. You can use the beginning balance report to help you reconcile that. The next item we want to do is to gather all our resources, like funding schedule from the California Department of Education, CDE, as a backup to help us reconcile the revenue. Some of the apportionment schedule or funding schedule would be apportionment and categorical funding and etc. The next thing we want to do is to review all revenue to ensure that they're classified correctly and are in line with our budgeted revenue. And the next item we want to look at is also review all expenditure to ensure they do not exceed current anticipated revenue. Also make sure all expenditure comply with the program requirement. Next slide. And we want to look at the object 6,000 range. Make sure the function 8,500 is capital outlay expenditure. And the next thing we want to do is kind of clean up any coding error, such as not limited to resource object function. A useful tool that we use would be the validation table you can download from CDE website. You can also go into the SACS web system to look for the valid code combination. The next item we want to look at is resource to ensure that to close out all obsolete resource and replace them with the current resource. You can also use a master resource list as of March 2024 from CDE website. We included a link in here. And the next item we want to look at is audit finding for 2022-23. Make sure that you review your audit finding, do any adjustment, make a plan of correction so that you don't have the repeated error for the future year. Your resource will be your 22-23 audit report. Next slide, please. And the next thing we want to look at is the balance sheet. We want to analyze prior year transaction for object code 9200 XX, account receivable 95XX, account payable 9330 prepaid expenditure, 9310 due from other fund, 9610 due to other fund, 9650 unearned revenue, and 99XX for your non-operating accounts expense clearing account. And DBAS will also be sending a reminder at the end of June to help to remind district to clear the spend account. Next slide. The next thing we want to look at inter-fund transfer. We want to make sure our temporary inter-fund borrow has been repaid in the same fiscal year, unless the borrow occurred within the final 120 calendar day of the fiscal year. And make sure you don't borrow more than 75% of that particular fund. Next slide. Let's set up for a year-end closing calendar by using the state and district business service deadline calendar. As Anna mentioned earlier, here's a sample of a year-end closing calendar. You have the first column, the date, the second column, the activity, the third column could be fun, and the fourth column, you can add the assignment who will be doing the closing. And then next step would be year-end closing, and Jamel will be introducing the process.
Okay, thank you, Yan. So the current year closing activities, and then there's our activities that are normally year-end transactions. So first, the current year is like this cycle here. First, you want to review your GL. This was mentioned in the previous slides. The cash should be positive in all funds. If not, then run a detailed report to find out what happened and then make the correction. Then you want to confirm your AR and AP, which was also mentioned. Then you want to create your SACS export file for 2024. Then you want to import your file into SACS Web. Then you can start completing your SACS reports, and then you can run your technical review checklists, TRCs, and clear all fatal errors and explain your warnings. Ideally, this is good to run early on as you can detect errors and correct it. Then you can run another GL to see that all your entries are recorded. This is basically a cycle which you repeat until all the errors are cleared and you can have a final official file. Next slide, please. So following are some of the items you want to look at. So the audit adjustments, you want to see if you have any, and if you do, you want to make sure those are booked as soon as they become known. And of course, earlier we mentioned accounts receivable, accounts payable in cash. So for those accruals, you want to prepare and post the adjusting entries for the revenue related to services performed or use of facilities provided before June the 30th. And determine if an AR has been set up for all outstanding billings or invoices. For your payables, you want to accrue items such as payroll, items received or rendered, services rendered by June the 30th. And you want to make sure your cash reconciliations are prepared for all cash accounts as of June 30th. And prepare entries to adjust the cash accounts if the books are not correct. If you are closing any funds, you want to make sure you have a board resolution, and then you can submit it to your advisory teams. And generally, if you have any coding errors, you want to make sure you classify it to the correct account string. Next, please. Some other activities are the due to, due from, as was mentioned. Make sure they're accurate. And your 9310 should always have a positive balance, and your 9610 should have a negative balance. In general, you look at all the items mentioned previously, but also in particular the suspense accounts, 99XX. Make sure the suspense accounts have been analyzed and addressed. And your indirect costs, make sure these are looked at and have been calculated and recorded. The inventory, verify that your GL matches your physical inventory. And for prepaid expenditures, you want to verify if you are paying in advance for services that affect multiple years and book a prepaid expense. And your transfers in and out should always equal. Next slide, please. So we have the closing activities, posting entries for the districts and DBAS. Districts will accrue the fourth quarter lottery, and they should use the AR object 92XX and credit the 8560. And it should distinguish restricted and unrestricted portions. And lottery funding is based on the annual ADA for the current year. However, since annual ADA is not available until after the fiscal year ends, lottery funding is initially allocated using the prior year's annual ADA and adjusted in the subsequent fiscal year. And then districts also book the EPA fourth quarter apportionment, and they will post the fourth quarter apportionment, and the payment is expected around August 15th. And for DBAS, we will post the third quarter lottery apportionments on or about July 11th. Fourth quarter interest accruals will be posted by us and around July the 31st. And the SELPA, we will post these as well during August. The SELPA units will prepare the fiscal year's final adjustment entries for special education state aid and COE excess property tax transfers. At that time, the SELPA administrators will also instruct districts on the preparation of the fiscal year 24 accruals related to federal funds. Next slide, please. And our next topic is grants and entitlements. And this is relevant when preparing the CAT form. So the preparer will need to know the difference between a grant and an apportionment. A grant is a contribution, either in money or material goods, made by one governmental entity to another. Grants may be for specific or general purposes. Next slide, please. And entitlements are an apportionment based on specific qualifications or formula defined in statute. Next is for some other activities, or you want to review the programs for compliance. You want to make sure there is a 15% administrative cost limit for federal programs, that you don't go over this. And you want to verify programs exempt from indirect costs have not been charged. Next, please.
Second, I'm having a little technical issue.
Oh, that's okay.
Here we go.
So you want to make sure you confirm maximum allowable indirect is not exceeded. You want to book indirect costs for programs that allow these charges. And you want to make sure that transfers of indirect costs must net to zero for all funds and by function for the inter program and interfund objects. And then you want to make sure that contributions from unrestricted revenues must net to zero by fund, and the transfers of restricted balances must net to zero. There are two types of categorical programs. So programs subject to deferred revenue and programs subject to restricted ending balance. This is something you need to know when preparing a CAT form. The CAT form will help in determining carryover, accounts payable, accounts receivable, deferred revenue, and or restricted ending balance at the end of the fiscal year for all categorical programs. If you need to know more information on whether a particular program is restricted or unrestricted, is allowable to have an ending balance or unearned revenue, or if indirect costs are allowable, you can go to the following website below and go to the SACS query and input the resource number, and you will get the following information on the next slide. So it looks like that. And once you put in your parameters, you get the next slide. This is the form that will come up and will show all the details of the particular resource number, and it will show whether it is unearned or has an ending fund balance, as well as if indirect costs are allowable. The next topic will be covered by Rich, creating an unaudited actual export file.
Hi everyone, so I'm going to cover how to get the unaudited actual file from QCC. Next slide, please. So when you're in the QCC main menu tree, you're going to go to Print Manager, Job Menu, Utilities, and the Job Menu icon right there. And then from the Job Menu, you can search in the grid view for a SACS Actuals export. So I typed in SACS Actual, and then double clicking it to get to the next screen. And this is the report that's called up to get your export. You want to give it a title. So this one's called Unaudited Actuals Files for SACS. The file name is a 5-character file name that you're going to assign to it. Here I just use my initials and 25A for 2425 unaudited actuals. Your LEA IDs pre-filled by your county district number, so you don't have to do anything there as long as you're logged into QCC on your account. For budget year, fiscal year, since we're doing the next year, we have it set to 25 for 2425. Your source will be your approved budget for source year 25, and then your unaudited actual source is your working budget from the current year. At the bottom there, you just want to leave the roll values checked so that they follow the SACS export data correctly. Once you have all this information set into this screen, it's always good to save a preset so you don't have to do it again year over year. So you click on that save icon in the upper left-hand corner to save it as a preset. Just give it a name that you can call up every year. And then when you're ready to run it, you just hit that icon with the lightning bolt and the battery, and then it will go into your QSS transfer download file, which we'll be covering in the next slides. Okay, so now you're downloading that file that we just saved from that export to a PC. Next slide. And to get there, it's going to be under your Print Manager, Job Menu, Utilities, Upload/Download Files, QSS XFR. Next slide. And then this is a screen that it calls up where you have the select transfer rule. You can just leave it at 0, 1 to get your SACS file. Once it's on set on 0, 1, you're gonna want to click the 3 dots next to account where that second red arrow is. And then that will call up this screen for the file transfer where you're going to locate that file that we saved from the unaudited actuals save file earlier. So when I call it RA25A, I just put that in my filter file names, and then it shows up right there in that eSACS group directly for that file E90 RA25A. So I'm just going to click that and then the green button, and then we'll get to the next screen. And then that will call it up on that left-hand side where it says server file name. That's the actual file name for the file for my SACS file. And I'm going to go ahead and click the 3 dots again to the right of local file name to save it to a location on my desktop. So here I just selected a desktop and I created a folder called SACS file for it. And I named it something I can easily identify, where this one's just SACS 2324 actuals. And then I click on open for the next slide. And then it will populate that to the local file name, so I know it's going to that path. And then once I save it, I'm going to go, once I want to generate that file, I'm going to click on that paper icon in the upper left-hand corner where that red arrow is. Next slide. And then it's going to say the transfer is complete. So now that file got saved to that location that I populated. And next slide. From this window, you can also just see what the data is on that file that got generated by clicking that file data tab to the right of the transfer rules tab. And that's the actual text file that's going to go into the SACS software that we import later. And then if I navigate to that folder where I saved it on my desktop, you can see that that SACS 2324 actuals file got saved there. And that's just the DAT file that the SACS software is going to use to import the data into. And Susan's going to be covering how to actually import that file into your SACS software.
All right, welcome. Here we go. So just a little disclaimer here. This presentation is going to assume that you're already familiar with the SACS web system. We're just going to go over some of the highlights and how to prepare your unaudited actuals in SACS, but this is not a comprehensive SACS web training. If you need more detailed information or additional SACS training, please reach out to your advisor and we can either help you or get you set up so that you're getting the training that you need. Again, this is a high level specific to unaudited actuals. And the steps in this presentation are going to be how to import your DAT file into SACS Web and overriding your DAT file in the SACS Web system, and then which forms are required for you to complete and promote in SACS and send to us as PDFs. And then just a brief mention about the charter school alternative form. So getting started, you're starting out in SACS Web. So you've logged into the SACS Web system. You're going to make sure that you check the fiscal year. And then you're going to make sure that you have selected the import tab from the blue menu bar. And go ahead and check that you are making sure that you're selecting the single import for that. The SACS import feature does allow you to actually allows users with either the edit dataset or the edit draft dataset user role to import either a single or multiple datasets for a particular reporting period. For most of us during our reporting periods, we're only going to be importing a single dataset. So the single import selection feature should be your default. That should be the one that you go ahead and select. And then make sure that everything matches as possible your reporting period, your fiscal year, your entity, which is a county or a district, and then hit the import menu. It's going to display, again, the two options, the single or the multiple import. Go ahead and select the single import, and then we'll go from there. So this is what that looks like. You're going to either have the option to select official or other. For most purposes, when you're importing from your financial system, you're going to be selecting other. It's not an official data set yet. So go ahead and select other, then give it a name that you like. That will help you to identify it in the SAC system. Sorry, my computer's blowing up. And then select the reporting period from the reporting period drop-down menu. So when you look at the user guide, the pictures are all going to look like this. This is sort of an old snapshot that they took. When you open it up now, it looks more like this. So you'll be selecting your reporting period horizontally instead of vertically. So you want to make sure that you're going to get the unaudited actuals, and that you will select the data type. For most districts, it's going to be SACs. If you're a charter school, then that would be the option that you would choose there. And then go forward over here. And then once you've got your file imported, you can begin to work on your forms. So you'll be clicking on the dashboard, you'll see your file here, and then you will just click on the blue numbers here to get access to your forms and things. If you ever need to overwrite your data set, so you've imported your original data set, you've looked at it, you've run your TRCs, and you've got some things you need to clean up back in your financial system, or for most of us it's QCC. And then you go back, you clean it up, and you're going to re-import. You don't want to go through the process that we just went through, because then you're going to have a second data set in your SACS web system. What you really want to do is re-import the data to overwrite the data that's in your original data set. So to do that, you will need to go to, excuse me, you'll need to go to the left navigation tab. So just some basic information about, using the override system. You'll have the option to delete all data, or you'll have the option to delete only. Make sure you hit the delete only option, because you don't want to wipe everything out. All you want to do is overwrite your financial information that's coming from your financial system. Because if you've already started working on your supplementals and stuff, you don't want to erase that. So make sure you hit the delete only option on that. All right, and then to overwrite, again, you're going to go over here you're going to have gotten your file from the dashboard. You're going to click on the blue numbers. You're going to get your left navigation pane right here. From here, you're going to hit an import. So you can see that there's an import up here in the top line, and there's a second option to import over here. This is where you do your initial import. This is where you do your overwrite import. So you'll go ahead and click on that, and you'll follow the basic instructions just like you did with your regular import. You'll go ahead and you'll click the other type of file. You'll click delete only those forms. Right here, those are your options. You'll submit, and your new file will come in and overload your old file. Now we'll just give a brief overview of the SACS forms that we require here and that are required by the state. So these are the forms that you're going to be submitting to your SCCOE advisor, as well as those that will be part of your SACS submission when you go ahead and promote it through the SACS system. We need to make sure that you have the table of contents, all of your fund forms, Form A, Form Asset, the CA, the CAT. Oops, I'm sorry. Click happy there. The CAT forms are actually not required to do in SACS. You can do those as a spreadsheet if that's easier for you, if you're keeping track of them that way. It needs to contain the same data as the SACS CAT forms. You can do your Form CEA, the Form DET, the ESMOE, the GAN, the ICR, LPRC, PCRAF, SIAA, and all of your TRCs. In addition to the SACS forms, we do require any kind of board presentation materials that you have prepared that you'll be sharing at your board meetings, on narratives and assumptions, your STRS on behalf calculations. The SEMA and SEMB forms are required to be submitted to your self-administrator, but go ahead and make sure that they're part of your SACS submission as well. If you're keeping track of anything outside of SACS, such as associated student body, or some districts actually do their Fund 51 outside of SACs, and make sure that we have those requirements as well. And then when applicable, anything else that would be required would be like your annual audit information, any updates to that you've gotten since the last reporting period, any collective bargaining agreements, disclosures, new actuarial reports, new debt instruments, any upcoming parcel tax, any retro pays, anything like that that we haven't seen yet. Make sure that we have access to that, and you sent that along with your submission as well. And please, as always, notify us if there's been any changes in your board president, in your administrators, your superintendents, your chief business officials, or fiscal directors. These are just the recommended sequence of events, not events, I'm sorry. The recommended sequence for completing your forms in SACs. These are CDE's recommendations. They believe that if you enter them in this order, you'll have fewer TRCs. So they recommend that once you've got your data imported and you reviewed it, you've made any corrections and re-imported, go ahead and start with your Form A, which is your average daily attendance. Then work on your CAT forms, which is the schedule of categoricals. These are really helpful forms to help you determine how much you might need to be setting up for future reference. So any ARs you might need to set up as well. Then run your TRCs, then make any corrections in your financial system, re-import, rerun. Then you can run your program cost report, schedule allocation factors, provide any allocation factors. If there are expenditures that support functions in undistributed goal. You can run your program cost center reports, which total all your costs by program. You can run your CEA, which is your current expense formula for minimum classroom compensation, and make sure that you're meeting that requirement. Your form asset, your form debt, your form ICR, your form L, which is of course your lottery report, and then the all important GAM limit forms. So after every form that you have filled out, it is important that you consider rerunning your TRCs, and if needing, going back to your financial system, making corrections, and then re-importing so that you can clear those TRCs. Continuing on that list, again, it's talking about running your TRCs, and then making sure that you make your changes as needed. Then have a look at your components of ending fund balance. This I always do at the very end after I'm making sure that all of my TRCs are cleared, and I don't have to go back to my general ledger, because once you make corrections in your components of ending fund balance, if you have to re-import, you'll have to do that again. That does not save. Then make sure you've got your form CA, your unaudited actual certification completed. All of your fund forms are good to go. You've got them all saved. Run your TRCs again, and then you can look at your table of contents. So go ahead and print that, and you can actually print forms from your table of contents so that you don't have to go in and print your forms individually to PDFs. Again, just a reminder that for unaudited actuals, there are 4 data types of TRCs. You will have to make sure that you run the TRCs for all 4 data type. That's your actuals to date, your board approved operating budget, your original budget, and your projected totals. And again, where are all those forms? So once you've gotten into your dashboard, you've clicked on your file, you've opened it up, you've got your left navigation tab here. You will click on the caret by forms, and that will open up. You'll see funds and supplementals. You click on the caret next to supplementals, and that will list all of the forms that you can go ahead and get started on. So once you're working on your forms, if you have any questions, some of you may be new to this, it might be your first year. There's really good detailed information in the SACS user guide. You can get to the SACS user guide from the SACS financial webpage. You can click on that link, and that'll take you to that web page. From there, you can go ahead and download your own personal copy of the user guide for your reference. You can also click on this link here and get the online version of it. Or anytime you're in the SAC system and you see this little question mark icon, you can click on that and it'll take you to the user guide. If you're going to be using the online version of the user guide, just some useful, helpful guides here. Go ahead and navigate to the data set subset tab and click on the forms caret, and then click on the supplemental caret. And then on the right side of your screen, you're gonna the list of forms will appear. So it will look like this when you get there. You've clicked on that little question mark, or you've gone directly to the SACS user guide online. You're going to click on the dataset submissions tab right here. You'll click on forms, open the caret. You'll click on supplementals, which will open a caret, and you will click on budget. Even though this is unaudited actuals, you will click on budget for the user guide, but the form listings are the same for budget and unaudited actuals. Then over here on your right side of the screen, we'll open up this navigation tab right here, and you can go through and select whichever form you want to. Once you select your form, you'll get line by line detailed instructions on what's required to fill out that form. All right, and our recommendation is that you go ahead and you complete and verify that you have correct data in your SEMAs and SEMBs, even though those are not required by us, and will need to be printed and submitted to your self-administrator, but that deadline is not until September 15th. But you really should go ahead, get them done, completed and corrected prior to the last day to make entries in your financial system, which for those of us who are using QCC is September 9th. Sometimes you have to go in and make adjustments to expenditures, move things around. You want to be able to do that before the books are closed. And then, of course, if you do have to go in and move things around, you're going to have to run your TRCs again. So make sure you do that. The SEMAs and SEMB forms are not under the same supplemental form tab that the other forms are in. They're under the reports caret from the left navigation tab. So that would look here in your left navigation tab. You would click on reports, open the caret, and all of these will be listed, and your SEMAs and SEMBs are listed right at the bottom, right down there. All right, this is helpful because for those of you that have worked in SACS, either the SACS web-based or the old SACS system, you know that clearing your TRCs can be kind of frustrating because of all the form dependencies. Every time you make a change in something, it can affect another form, and then you don't get to clear out of your TRCs because you have these form dependencies, fatal errors. So this can help you do that. If you open and close and save the forms in this order, you'll clear that dependent form TRC. And then always remember, once you've got everything done and you're all good to go, run your TRCs one more time to make sure that you have everything cleared. If you are writing an explanation for an error that has a W next to it, so a warning error, please make sure that your explanation addresses that specific error and gives a complete understanding as to why the district is receiving that specific warning. All your fatal errors must be cleared before you can promote your file through the SACS web system. I'm actually going to correct that because you can go ahead and promote it with fatal errors. We will send it back to you. So please make sure that all your fatal errors are cleared before you promote. It is important that you are able to promote your file as an official file. It's most important specifically at unaudited actuals. So make sure that all your errors are cleared before you send it to us, or you'll get it right back from us. That'll be the first thing we'll be checking for. Okay. And then for charter schools, I don't know if we have any charter school people with us right now, but This is not new. Starting last year for the unaudited actuals, the charter schools needed to report their unaudited actuals in the SACS web system. You can use either the standardized form or they can use the charter school alternative form, and both are available in the SACS web system. The CDE will no longer be accepting any hard copy submissions. Everything needs to be submitted through SACS. So if you are a charter school and you need help getting into SACS, or you need to get your user roles set up, please contact your charter school authorizer and they will make sure that you get the help that you need. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Rama, who's going to talk about best practices. Rama, you're on mute.
Thank you, Susan. So now we do best practices. Next slide, please.
Mhm.
So most of you must already be doing these things, so they're not new to you, I guess. And this is not a very comprehensive list. It just has a few that came to our mind. So you have to run QCC reports after every set of corrections you make. And then when you do that, make sure that whatever corrections you wanted has happened in it, and whether any further changes are needed. And then when you run those QCC reports and do an import, make sure you do the TRCs also. You run your TRCs and fix the errors if any have come up. And then make sure the Fund 01 matches the final QCC extract. So that's what you want to see in SACS. So make sure that the two are matching, because it's a good idea to make sure that those are matching, as also the beginning balances matching prior year's ending balance. I believe the new at unaudited actual SACS ensures that this matches, but it's better to do a double check on that. And then regarding the 9,000s, a good idea is to clear whenever it's possible during the year, whatever 9,000s are possible to be cleared, so that you don't have to keep all of them towards the end of the year while closing. Next slide. While you prepare your adopted budget, make sure you adjust your estimated actuals so that they are as close as possible to the actuals, so that there is not much of a gap between the two, and thereby you don't have to give explanations for in your presentations or at audit time. This also make sure that this also makes sure that there's transparency and a higher level of confidence in the budget. If you're submitting your CAT forms, make sure that these CAT forms tie to the spreadsheets that you maintain for various programs and resources. That brings us to the end of the best practices. We have a next slide for the resources. That concludes the program, the presentation. Susan, you want to?
All right, so thank you all for attending. Are there any questions? Feel free to go ahead and unmute if you have a question. Okay. All right. Hopefully this was recorded and we'll go ahead and post it in the QCC portal. If it wasn't recorded, we'll certainly make the PowerPoint available for everybody. But thank you all very much for your attendance and your attention. And as always, if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you so much.